Today, we will be going over biotic and abiotic factors. An ecosystem is defined by how the living and non-living parts depend and associate with each other and their environments. The relationship between the two is what shapes the ecosystems that we see today. A biotic factor is anything that is living. Remember, bio means life, just like biology is the study of life. Biotic factors also include the products of those living things. If we look at the first example, bees are living, so the honey they produce can also be considered biotic. Animals produce waste, so urine and fecal matter can also be considered biotic. When leaves fall off a tree, we consider them dead, but they are still biotic because at one point they were alive. As I told you before, ecosystems change depending on how biotic and abiotic factors interact. It's possible for two biotic factors to interact with each other. A very common example is when we breathe. When we're breathing, we are using the oxygen produced by plants, and we breathe out the carbon dioxide they need for photosynthesis. Another example would be getting sick. When our bodies interact with microorganisms like viruses or bacteria, we show symptoms that can include coughing, sneezing, or even diarrhea. An abiotic factor is anything that is not living and was never alive at one point. Remember what I told you about the leaves. Abiotic factors are the physical and chemical components of the ecosystem. An example is salt in fresh water. They have different concentrations of salt, and that helps determine which organisms each water type supports. Climate can also have a drastic effect on an ecosystem. Think about the polar ice caps, how they're melting, and the effects it's going to have on the organisms living there. As we discuss how biotic and abiotic factors interact, we need to consider the limiting factor. A limiting factor is pretty much anything that is in short supply. It creates competition amongst organisms. If you look at the picture here, people are competing with the other animals for water. That can also include them competing with the plants because we all need water in order to survive. Another example would be lions. If there are only a limited amount of females, the male lions will need to compete for their attention to find a potential mate. If they do not find a mate, they will not be able to reproduce and pass on their genetic material. The limiting factor here is the number of females. By now, you should know what a biotic and abiotic factor is, how they interact with one another, and how those interactions lead to competition for the components that are in short supply. You should be able to do the rest of your assignments on Canvas. If you need any help, just send me a remind message.